Take $10 million, turn it into $135 billion.
Right.
That is a 13,500 times return on your initial capital.
Subscribe!
It's staggering.
It really is. Now, try to achieve that unprecedented level of financial success while spending your entire adult life actively trying to stay, well, completely invisible.
Yeah, it creates a fascinating paradox. I mean, in a modern business culture that practically demands loud, flashy behavior from its billionaires, we are looking at a man who viewed his monumental wealth not as a megaphone, or a ticket to fame, but purely as an instrument to buy total personal independence.
Exactly. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore the mind, the life, and the remarkably effective philosophy of that intentionally obscure mastermind, Charlie Munger.
And we have an incredible set of sources laid out in front of us today.
We really do. We are pulling from an excerpt from Poor Charlie's Almanack, which was compiled by Peter D. Kaufman. The material includes a biographical portrait by Michael Bragi, some really deep reflections Munger had on aging, inspired by the Roman philosopher Cicero, and this is my favorite part, incredibly personal memories from his own children.
Yeah, those are fantastic. And the ultimate objective for you, the listener, is to absorb a piece of what Munger called worldly wisdom.
Right.
To be clear from the start, this material does not contain a magical stock-picking formula.
No, not at all.
Instead, it outlines how to build a lattice work of mental models in your mind.
And a mental model is simply a cognitive tool, right? Like a framework borrowed from disciplines like biology or physics, used to simplify and understand complex reality.
Exactly. The goal is to stack these models so you become deeply rational, fiercely independent, and capable of weathering life's most brutal storms.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand a man who would eventually tell his business peers, if your new behavior gives you a little temporary unpopularity, well, then to hell with them, we can't start our analysis on Wall Street.
No, we really can't. We have to trace his mental architecture back to its foundation, which was forged in a very specific crucible.
The Great Depression.
Right. That foundation begins in Omaha, Nebraska during those grueling years. Munger's first exposure to business was working at a local grocery store called Buffett & Son.
And if that name sounds somewhat familiar to you, it is because his future business partner, Warren Buffett, also worked there as a boy, albeit a few years later.
Right. So they were both learning the ropes under Warren's grandfather, Ernest Buffett.
And Ernest was famously demanding, wasn't he?
Oh, incredibly. He required 12-hour shifts from the boys with no meals and no designated breaks.
Wow.
Yeah. He also possessed these intensely strong political convictions that he made sure to impart to his employees.
Like being staunchly anti-socialist.
Exactly. And just to be clear, we are just looking at this historically to understand the environment, not taking a stance on the politics here.
Right, of course.
But when the Social Security Act was newly enacted, Ernest put his beliefs into practice on payday. He physically required the young boys to hand back 2 pennies from their $2 daily wage to cover the new tax.
Just to make a point.
Yeah, he would pair this physical taking of the pennies with a stern lecture on the dangers of creeping socialism.
I mean, the physical act of handing those pennies back must have left quite an impression regarding how economic systems impact the individual.
Definitely.
But the sources indicate Charlie wasn't just hauling heavy boxes and listening to lectures. He was already displaying this highly analytical, optimizing mindset.
He was. He was constantly looking for systems he could control. Like, he started a hamster breeding operation in his basement.
A hamster farm.
Yeah, and he was negotiating with other children to acquire the largest or, most unusually colored hamsters to maximize his margins.
That is hilarious.
It was. But that operation only ended when his mother shut it down due to the pungent odor of 35 hamsters taking over the house.
I can only imagine. And he also took a seemingly tedious job that paid 40 cents an hour just to stand on the street and count passersby, right?
It did.
But counting pedestrians sounds agonizingly boring. I mean, why would a brilliant kid choose that over carrying groceries?
Because he was already optimizing for mental freedom over physical labor. Standing still and counting allowed his mind to wander and consume information.
Right. He was devouring the writings of Benjamin Franklin at that time.
Exactly. And he was developing a profound fascination with Albert Einstein, specifically studying how physicists use sound theory to address vast unknown variables.
Which eventually led him to study physics and meteorology at Caltech.
It did.
But how does learning about like weather patterns and thermodynamics translate to the business world later on?
Well, physics teaches you to look for fundamental, undeniable laws of nature. It strips away human emotion. Munger took that physics-based lens and applied it to human behavior in financial markets.
So it's almost like treating life like a giant, tragic, but solvable thermodynamics equation.
Here.
Seeking rational order, even when life is brutally chaotic.
That is exactly it. He started viewing business not as a gamble, but as a system of numerical logic and causality. And his intellect was so undeniable that he was admitted to Harvard Law School without ever finishing an undergraduate degree.
Wait, really? How does that even happen?
The dean of Harvard Law at the time, Roscoe Pound, actually had to step in and override the admissions office to get him in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Dean Pound was a family friend who recognized Munger's rare processing power. Munger utilized the educational funding provided to returning veterans after World War II to attend.
And he didn't just he graduated magna cum laude.
High academic honors. But here is where the application of pure logic crashes into the chaotic reality of human existence.
Because his personal life takes a devastating turn.
It does. His first marriage fails and ends in divorce, and then he faces a parent's ultimate nightmare.
His son.
Yes, his 8-year-old son, Teddy, is diagnosed with leukemia. Now, in the 1950s, before modern bone marrow transplants or advanced chemotherapy, this was an absolute death sentence.
There was zero medical hope.
None. A close friend of Munger's recalled seeing him, this brilliant man who could solve any complex equation, just walking the streets of Pasadena, weeping uncontrollably.
That is just heartbreaking. It is as if he had spent his early life constructing this elegant, flawless mathematical formula to explain how the world works, and then the universe introduces a brutally chaotic, entirely unsolvable variable that shatters the whole system.
It forces a total recalibration of a person's soul. For Munger, surviving that emotional devastation meant radically changing his trajectory to seek absolute control over his own destiny.
Right.
He eventually marries a Stanford graduate named Nancy, who had 2 young boys of her own. They merge their families and go on to have 8 children in total.
And professionally.
Professionally, he takes a hard look at his successful legal career and realizes it fundamentally traps him.
Because in law, you are always trading your time for money. He is looking at his billable hours, and then he's looking across the table at his firm's wealthy capitalist clients, like Harvey Mudd, and he realizes he wants to be the one deploying capital, not billing for time.
Exactly. He was heavily inspired by the economist Lord John Maynard Keynes. Munger's stated goal wasn't merely hoarding cash to buy mansions, though.
No, he wanted to get rich for the express purpose of becoming completely independent. Wealth was the vehicle, but autonomy was the destination.
Perfectly said. So he partners up with Otis Booth to develop real estate near Caltech, leveraging his local knowledge to turn a $100,000 investment into a $300,000 profit.
Which is a huge jump.
Yeah, and he rolls those profits forward until he builds a $1 million nest egg by the early 1960s. Then he launches his own investment partnership, Wheeler, Munger and Company.
And the performance of that partnership really demonstrates the practical power of his mental models, right?
It does. Over 14 years, they compounded capital at 19.8% annually.
Which is astronomical. But wait, if you look at the historical data in the sources, that period includes the brutal bear market of 1973 and 1974. His portfolio's value plummeted by roughly 31% in back-to-back years.
It did. It was a bloodbath.
So how does someone hold their nerve when a third of their net worth just vanishes?
Well, he utilized a specific mental model borrowed from a 19th century German mathematician named Carl Jacobi.
Okay.
The directive was simple. Invert, always invert. Jacobi believed that the solution to complex problems often reveals itself when you look at the problem entirely backward.
Walk us through how inversion actually works in practice, like during a market crash.
Sure. So instead of asking, how do I make brilliant investments to get rich? Munger asked the inverted question, what are the standard ways investors guarantee their own financial ruin?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and the answers are obvious, right? Panicking during a downturn, selling solid assets at bottom barrel prices, and following the herd.
So by simply identifying the mechanisms of failure and refusing to do them, he survived the crash.
Exactly. He held his positions because the underlying math was sound, and the very next year, his portfolio rebounded by over 73%.
Wow. But let me push back on this career shift for a moment.
Yeah.
He abandons the law to chase capital so he can buy his independence. Looking purely at the mechanics, does this just boil down to a pursuit of unadulterated greed?
It's a fair question, but the historical footprint he left behind firmly rejects the idea of pure greed. When he left active legal practice in the mid-1960s, he helped found a firm now known as Munger, Tullis, and Olson.
And his name is still at the top of that roster today.
It is, because of the ethical framework he permanently installed. He demanded his partners take on quiet pro bono work for the impoverished. He instituted a rule that the firm should choose clients as you would choose friends.
The sources actually mention a specific incident with a young partner at the firm, Fred Warder, who tragically died of cancer.
Yes.
When Munger departed the firm, instead of extracting his own share of the firm's capital, he directed that money to be given to Warder's widow to support her children.
Right, and that behavior illustrates the core of Munger's philosophy. Independence gives you the freedom to be deeply moral without worrying about the financial consequences.
It makes a lot of sense.
This multidisciplinary success, combined with his ethical stance, made him a prominent figure locally, which perfectly cued up a homecoming dinner in Omaha in 1959.
Yes. The dinner arranged by Dr. Ed Davis.
Dr. Davis was a local physician and a close friend of the Munger family. In a fascinating twist of fate, Dr. Davis had previously handed a young Warren Buffett $100,000 to invest.
Just handed it to him.
Yeah. And when Buffett asked why a doctor would trust him with such a sum, Davis replied that Buffett simply reminded him of Charlie Munger.
That is incredible.
So Davis finally orchestrates a dinner to put these two identical mentalities in the same room.
And Warren Buffett's wife at the time, Susie, was at that dinner. Her observations in the sources capture the dynamic perfectly.
They really do.
She noted that Warren usually dominated every room he entered because his brain just processed information faster than anyone else. But that night, she watched Warren go completely quiet, intentionally letting Charlie take the lead. She called it a combustion, a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Buffett later summarized why he yielded the floor. He said if he had to distill Munger's success down to a single word, it would be rational.
I think the best way to visualize their dynamic is to look at how modern algorithms work.
How so?
Well, it's like Buffett was the raw processing power, generating thousands of ideas and moving at lightning speed. But Munger was the filtering software. He was the ultimate error detection program, quietly and ruthlessly eliminating every irrational variable before the final output was executed.
I love that analogy. And that filtering mechanism was completely devoid of ego. Buffett famously admitted he spent 40 years looking for the usual in Charlie Munger and never found it.
They were just unique.
Their relationship was highly unusual, extending to a very dry, self-aware sense of humor.
Which brings us to the Commodore Charlie story.
Yes, it is the perfect example of that humor. So, Munger, Buffett, and a friend named Rick Guerin are out on a lake in Minnesota.
Okay.
The water is perfectly calm, not a single ripple. Yet somehow, Munger manages to single-handedly sink the boat they are sitting in.
Oh my God.
As Buffett and Guerin are literally treading water, trying not to drown, they start shouting at Charlie to acquire a boat with a little more stability next time.
And he takes that advice to a comical extreme, doesn't he?
He really does. He goes out and custom designs a massive 3,400 square foot catamaran.
That is absurd.
Guerin called it Munger's folly, teasing him that it was the only completely irrational thing Charlie had ever done.
And Munger defended it, right?
Yeah, he pointed out the supreme logic of the massive vessel. He said he had built a boat so absurdly large that it only carried a moderate risk of him sinking it single-handedly.
He never took his own prestige too seriously.
No, never. But while he clearly enjoyed a vibrant living peer in Buffett, Munger's actual framework for learning relied heavily on people who were no longer alive.
Right, he called it making friends with the eminent dead.
Exactly. He argued that you cannot truly understand economics by just memorizing abstract textbook definitions. You have to make Adam Smith your personal friend. You have to sit with his original text and understand how he viewed the world.
And this leads us to Cicero. Now, if you're listening to this right now, you're probably conditioned by modern culture to view aging as a slow, tragic, physical decline, a period where you become obsolete.
Right.
But Munger flips that script entirely, drawing heavily on this ancient Roman philosophy.
Yeah. At age 82, Munger is reading a specific translation of Cicero's essay De Senectute, which translates to On Old Age.
And the translation was done in 1744 by none other than Benjamin Franklin.
Right. Munger is stunned to see his own modern worldview perfectly mirrored in a text written 2,000 years ago.
What specific concepts did he find in Cicero that resonated so deeply?
Well, first, a highly realistic, almost cynical view of human nature. Cicero believed that governments must be built on strict checks and balances to prevent mob rule and demagogues.
And Munger suddenly realized that the physical architecture of his childhood high school in Omaha was built in a Greco-Roman style.
Exactly. The early Nebraskans were literally cementing Ciceronian values into the walls to subconsciously instruct the youth.
That's fascinating. And Munger also found deep personal validation in Cicero regarding his own personality flaws. He often worried that he was too talkative, that he enthusiastically lectured people on what they needed to know, which sometimes rubbed peers the wrong way.
And Cicero explicitly defends that trait. He writes that if an older person has acquired useful knowledge, being talkative is a helpful virtue for instructing the world.
Nice to have a Roman philosopher validate your talking habit.
Definitely. Cicero also provided a logical framework for how to handle pride.
Right. This requires unpacking a specific biblical reference from the sources of the parable of the Pharisee and the publican.
So in that parable, a Pharisee, a religious leader, loudly boasts to God about how righteous and good he is, while a publican, a tax collector, humbly asks for mercy.
The traditional takeaway is that boasting is sinful and humility is required.
Right, but Munger and Cicero rejected the interpretation that you should feel guilty about being proud of a life well spent.
By applying inversion.
Exactly. They argued that quietly patting yourself on the back for doing your duty actually reinforces and improves your future conduct.
Wait, so he actually thinks being old is better. Isn't that just a psychological coping mechanism for the fact that he is aging?
It sounds like it, but they also agreed that the mind ultimately renders the body irrelevant. Cicero uses an analogy from the Trojan War, pointing out that King Agamemnon never wished he had 10 more soldiers with the physical, brute strength of the warrior Ajax.
Right.
He wished he had 10 more advisors with the profound wisdom of the elderly Nestor, mind over body.
And Munger loved the practical, sometimes humorous benefits of aging, too. He shared an anecdote about an older friend he referred to as Glotz.
Oh, the Glotz story.
Yeah. Right before Glotz passed away at age 75, he told Munger he was actually thrilled because he had finally conquered the unwelcome, lustful thoughts he used to have about his friends' wives. The physical decline had finally given him total mental peace.
It fundamentally changes how you view a lifespan. I mean, Cicero is arguing that if you spend your days pursuing useful knowledge and honorable actions, the early, youthful part of your life is actually the inferior part.
Because in old age, you finally possess the full lattice work of wisdom and the undeniable comfort of a clean conscience.
Precisely. And Munger did not just hoard this Ciceronian wisdom for his own comfort, he actively beta tested it on the next generation.
Right.
Despite his immense wealth, his ultimate focus remained on moral character, which we see clearly in his philanthropic choices.
And those choices crossed typical ideological boundaries, didn't they?
Very much so. Munger identified as a conservative Republican, yet his primary charitable cause for years was Planned Parenthood. Yes, he applied pure rationality to the issue. And again, just reporting his views neutrally here, he concluded that society functions best when every child is born to a welcoming mother.
That makes sense within his logical framework.
He also heavily funded institutions dedicated to preserving knowledge, like the Munger Research Center at the Huntington Library.
But the most revealing application of his wisdom happened every night at his own dinner table.
With his kids.
Yeah. His daughter Wendy recalled that he rarely lectured his children. Instead, he used storytelling.
He deployed two specific types of stories, right?
Exactly. The first were morality tales, where a protagonist faced a difficult ethical dilemma and chose the right honorable path.
And the second?
The second, more potent tool was the downward spiral tale, where someone made a foolish or unethical choice and suffered catastrophic ruin.
It is the Jacobian version applied to parenting. Teach them exactly how to fail miserably so they know precisely which paths to avoid.
It's almost like he was programming his kids' moral GPS, using beta tests of other people's real-world disasters. You don't have to ruin your own life if you can learn from a downward spiral over a plate of pot roast.
And he modeled that behavior in real time for them. His son, Charles Jr., shared a memory of a family ski trip in Sun Valley.
The red Jeep story.
Yes. The family had borrowed their friend Rick Guerin's red Jeep. They were running incredibly late to catch a flight, totally pressed for time. Yet Charlie forces a 10-minute detour to a gas station just to top off a gas tank that was already half full.
When Charles Jr. expressed confusion about why they were risking their flight for a few gallons of gas, his dad delivered the lesson. Charlie, when you borrow a man's car, you always return it with a full tank of gas.
The friend likely wouldn't have noticed the missing gas, but that was entirely beside the point. It was an inflexible rule of fairness.
Right.
As his son realized later, Charlie wasn't just teaching him basic etiquette. He was teaching him the mechanics of how to keep a friend for life.
Which brings all of these sources into focus. The real secret to Charlie Munger isn't a complex derivative strategy. It is a lifelong, relentless commitment to rationality.
Absolutely.
It is the active study of the mistakes of others so you don't repeat them. It is making friends with the eminent dead to absorb their genius.
And it is the constant daily effort to improve your own moral character right up until the end. Because, as Cicero noted so long ago, the absolute best armor you can wear in old age is a life well spent in your youth.
We started this deep dive exploring a man who grew an empire to $135 billion while actively avoiding the spotlight, seeking only the independence to think clearly. Benjamin Franklin, who translated that Cicero text Munger loved so much, once wrote that he wouldn't mind living his life over again from beginning to end.
He just wanted one small advantage.
Exactly. He only asked for the advantage that authors have the ability to correct, in a second edition, the faults of the first. Now, for you listening, you don't get to write a literal second edition of your life. But looking at the chapters you are writing right now, what faults of your own first edition can you start correcting today using Munger's lattice work of wisdom?